I am slightly older than you. I discovered some movies slightly earlier than you. Well, that was a pretentious thing to say.
I can lead you astray, straight to hell if you like. Give me a big black box and I can open your eyes. Are we keeping it real? Are we keeping it tight? Are we all just victims of our infinite life?
Anyway, welcome back to EnterTheRealWorld.com's There Will Be Movies, Volume 1, the 2000. My name is Matt Waters. I'm joined as always by Ben Phillips. Ben, how are you this evening?
I'm good. I have just watched the 3-hour cut of Almost Famous.
Yeah, well, there you go. We're talking about Almost Famous today, so There Will Be Movies. This is our podcast covering 25 of our favourite movies to come out in the decade of 2000 to 2009. If you want a full rundown on how we arrived at this list and the vague rules and why certain films you would think would definitely be on our list given who we are and they're not, go check out episode 0, which will be all over the website, entertherealworld.com, soundcloud.com/Mike and Matt on the playlist there. Today, Almost Famous. This was selected by me.
I've got a question. So we didn't actually have this on the list of either Raw 20, but you kind of threw it out there at a later date and it just kind of like stuck on the list.
Yeah, when we got into the maybes and the, what should be on here, I was looking through. I can't remember who originally put it on the maybe pile, but I think I was the one that put the strong push to put it in. It's the kind of thing where, like, I had seen it, but not very recently, and I was like, I don't want to force our hand on a movie I vaguely remember. So this was sort of circling the bottom of the barrel for a long time if we needed to make any substitutions. And
I think we almost went with Mulholland Drive for a little bit. But
yeah, and I'm not a huge fan of David Lynch's movies, and you set yourself a little task, and I was like, go watch it, and tell me if you think it should be on here instead of Almost Famous, and you relented.
I loved what I saw. I think it would be a fascinating discussion, but
yeah, I think it's decent enough. I don't think it's top 25. So this one kept almost getting dropped for various things, and I'm sure when this is all over I will just be beside myself with guilt at letting certain movies not make it on while this did. But we live with our decisions.
Yeah, so I'm just intrigued. So what is your story with this? Because I saw it years and years ago. It was like one of those ones where, like, me being the wanky music guy that I am, this is kind of one of the preeminent kind of like music movies that kind of exists.
Which I am a big fan of. My story with it is I fucking love Empire Records. If we ever do a 90s, that is 100% going to be on my list of 20. I love singles.
I saw that for the first time whilst we were working at the retail establishment that we used to work at together.
Yeah.
And I just remember, like, for about a solid month after seeing it, I was just kind of like, I wanted to find a shoplifter and
just teach him the ways. Yeah, I love Empire Records. I love singles. Anything of that ilk. And Cameron Crowe made singles, and he went on to make Almost Famous. I wouldn't say I love Cameron Crowe, but I quite like Cameron Crowe. So.
I mean, I don't think anyone can realistically say that they love Cameron Crowe at this point, considering the career that he's had. He started off with, he wrote Fast Times at Ridgemont High, he directed Say Anything, singles, Jerry Maguire was huge, he obviously got, like, free reign to do whatever he wanted with Almost Famous. And then almost everything else since then has been. Yeah,
I mean, movies he did, as you will know, we are only allowing one movie per director in a given decade, but there is no chance Vanilla Sky or Elizabethtown were going to get on this list, so...
So you just love this kind of genre of movie?
Yeah, when we talked about wanting to make sure we were happy with our final list and representation, I'm looking at these and I'm thinking, I like sports movies, I like music movies, and, like, they're not always great. Particularly sports movies. There can be some really bad ones. I was very into Coach Carter because of the basketball, but that's not a great movie overall. So I did want to try and get my taste on here in some way. I believe we'll have a sports movie in Volume 2 next year. But
we have a sports movie on this one technically, but it's also my pick.
Well, there is that. Okay. I like this kind of thing, I would say.
I remember watching it. I potentially was too young. I cannot remember when I saw it. It was a good long while ago, and I definitely wasn't paying like 100% attention, but kind of like the imagery of the movie and the feel of it definitely stuck with me. Like, it's a movie that, even though I couldn't tell you the plot, not that there is much of a plot, but it was one that I could go like, oh no, I remember the imagery of Kate Hudson, and I remember the stuff behind the scenes at the festivals and the concerts and stuff like that, and I vividly remember all the stuff at the house with her mum and his mum and his sister.
Yeah.
in the early days, but it's definitely not one that kind of stuck with me in a way that I could like recommend it out to people, and I don't know why that is.
I'm a huge fan of like, this is a phenomenal collection of talent, a lot of them getting 1 line, 2 lines, but you know, a lot of them quite early in their career as well, and it's crazy to watch it through 2019's eyes and be like, oh my god, it's Zooey Deschanel and Jay Baruchel and Jimmy Fallon and Mark Maron and all these people, and you know, you're getting amazing performances from some of the top stars. And yeah, I mean, I feel there's some stuff in here that feels a little bit, you know, music, rock and roll cliche, but Cameron Crowe potentially helped make these things cliche by presenting them in the way he did. Like, he lived this. Like, that is the big, the thing you can't get away from. This is his life story, kind of.
Apparently there's a commentary for the movie which is with his mum.
Yes.
And, like, you listen to it and you kind of understand that, like, no, this isn't, like, him making up a character. He has literally taken...
Yeah, he was skipped ahead 3 years. He did do the things that happen in this. Like, he went on tour with the Allman Brothers, who pretended that they weren't going to let him run the article, and one of them jumped off the roof of a hotel, and he was in a plane crash with The Who that he could have died. You know, everything that happens in this, pretty much, it's either something he's experienced firsthand, or like would have enough authority in the music area to know about. It feels very legit. It doesn't feel like someone like romanticizing and imagining. Well, maybe there's a bit of romanticization, but you know, it doesn't feel like a leap of imagination, if that makes sense. But we would normally cover the year that was, but this also came out in 2000, and we did that with Memento, so none of that.
Yeah, so I will touch briefly on. So last time we did the box office stuff at the end, but we're going to do it at the start this time. So this came out in 2001, actually, in England. Neither of us obviously saw it in the cinema, I imagine, because this is almost definitely rated like a 15. It's not too bad as a movie in terms of language or anything like that, but it definitely feels...
I think it's like the lifestyle. I don't know, and the heavy implication that this is or not even an implication, this is like a 15, 16-year-old kid who is around this stuff, so I feel it's that kind of thing.
Yeah, so this movie opened at number 6 at the UK box office. It made $741,000 if we're converting pounds into dollars, which is 3 times as much as Memento made in its opening weekend in the US.
Still, back-to-back box office bombs, though. Like, this didn't even come close to making its budget back.
No, it did not. It definitely did not make enough money. But the top 5 the week that it came out in the UK: What Women Want, a classic of cinema, Dude, Where's My Car?
Of course.
Traffic, Castaway, and The Adventures of Rocky and Bullwinkle.
Wow. How do we not pick Castaway over Almost Famous? But I like Almost Famous more than Castaway, that's why. You've kind of alluded to it already, but basically the background here is Cameron Crowe made Jerry Maguire, and film companies were like, make any movie you want now, and this is something he had been wanting to make for a long time because it is his life story. Lawrence Kasdan actually encouraged him to make it. I guess they're friends. One of 2 Star Wars connections in this movie, thanks to Ben sharing some trivia with me about an hour ago. The kid that is playing young Cameron Crowe was in the running to play young Anakin Skywalker, right?
Yes, he came second to Jake Lloyd for episode 1.
The younger version lost out on playing young Anakin, and the older version, William Fugit, like, he went on to not be really prominent as an actor, just like anyone to play Anakin Skywalker.
He was in First Man last year, and he played the female police officer's partner in Gone Girl.
Okay, sure. I think it's just crazy that, you know, to be the lead in this movie that may have been a box office failure, but critically very well regarded. I think it makes lists for best movies of the 21st century quite a lot.
Yes, it is on the list that from They Shoot Pictures, Don't They? I do believe it is 188th best movie of the 21st century. Which, so, like, I mean, like, top 200.
So we're saying top 25, and they're saying top 200, okay.
I mean, there's also 2010 movies on this.
As I was saying, this is just his experiences being a under-18 music journalist writing for Rolling Stone. Many details about this are reflective of his life. His mother came in because she did a cameo. She's somewhere in the movie, I think.
I think her scene was cut. I think.
Okay.
I heard that basically they filmed a scene where he plays them Stairway to Heaven.
Oh, and they can get the rights.
They can get the rights.
On the bootleg edition, DVD or Blu-ray or whatever, there is, in the deleted scenes, you can watch this scene and it tells you, it cues, like, press play on Stairway to Heaven now. Because he did get permission to use several songs by Led Zeppelin, but they would not grant Stairway to Heaven.
But they don't. Why? They never give that one.
Why? It's not even that good of a... Oh, whatever.
So this is a complete tangent. I was watching a video on the music of Dragon Quest earlier on today, and I found out that the composer of Dragon Quest is a notoriously awful man who denies that the Japanese committed war crimes during World War II,
of course,
and all kinds of stuff. But also, like, he just doesn't like licensing his music out for his own games that he does. So, like, he's like, oh, no, I'm not going to do this as an orchestra. You're just going to release this game with a shitty soundtrack, so I can re-record it later and then have people pay me money to come see it be orchestrated.
Well, good. The Led Zeppelin of Japanese video games there. But his mother was on set anyway, even if her scene was cut, and she hovered over his shoulder during scenes such as the one where he loses his virginity, and he said that was very awkward. And also he tried to deny her access to Frances McDormand because he didn't want to influence her portrayal, but stepped out of the room, came back, and they had become immediate friends. So there you go.
Frances McDormand is so good in this.
Yes, she is. And apparently his mother and his sister were in fact estranged for almost a decade, right up until after this movie came out, at which point they reconciled. So potentially this movie saved a family. So there you go. He wanted to call it Untitled, which is... You went to watch it in the avenue it was available to you, and it was a extended cut, which has 40 minutes of footage I haven't seen, and it was called Untitled. So that's why that is the case.
Yeah, I literally went out last night to buy it, and it is not in stock at that retail establishment. It hasn't been for a long while. So I was just like, oh god, I've got to do a Google now, see whether or not I can find it. It was luckily available to me to stream. I got home and then just texted you and said, like, Matt, this movie's 3 hours long.
I was like, no, it isn't. I just watched it. It's 2 hours long.
It's 2 hours long. But no, I ended up watching the cut that has... So apparently there's not actually much substantive difference.
Okay.
It's kind of more extended versions of scenes, not many additions. So it's like they basically say, like, the scene is 2 minutes long in the movie, it's now 5 minutes long, and it kind of like gains its length from doing that.
Did you feel that you got to know some of the characters better because of those? Or I don't know how well you remember.
Which characters would you want me to say that I got to know better?
His sister, Anita.
If she disappears from the movie after she kind of jumps in the car and drives away and doesn't reappear until she's a flight attendant, then no.
Jeff Beebe, the lead singer, Jason Lee.
I mean, he probably does get some more stuff, but I wouldn't say like he's kind of like, in terms of people who I feel like I know, I feel like the entire band wasn't very well served.
Yeah, the band in general, everyone other than Russell, I feel it's like, I know nothing really about you.
I feel like I don't know anything about Crudup and Lee's characters. I think they both give good performances, and I think they both sell what they're given. I think, and they get infinitely more to do than the other two guys.
One of whom has one line, and it's, I'm gay.
I think it's kind of the point that you don't know them.
Yeah.
They're kind of like that kind of surface level. They think they just want to be famous, and every single line that Lee has is this kind of like wanky, like, I'm making music as art and I'm taking it super seriously, which is this thing that Lester Bangs is kind of like going on about, like, not being the good thing. And because he's kind of like taking this self-serious route to music, I think that's kind of his character, is that he's not presenting a real self, he's presenting a thing that he thinks he needs to present to be seen as a legitimate artist.
Sure, that makes sense. So, we're talking about now. Stillwater, the fake band, loosely based on various bands that Cameron Crowe covered. Peter Frampton served as technical consultant for the movie, wrote 2 of the Stillwater songs. Cameron Crowe and his wife, Nancy Wilson, I think they're split up now, but his wife at the time, they wrote the other 3 songs. There are 5 Stillwater songs. So there's even a Stillwater music video, I think, for Fever Dog that Cameron Crowe put together. And Mike McCready of Pearl Jam plays guitar on all the Stillwater songs. So there you go.
Pete Frampton of Humble Pie, which is a band that is mentioned in this movie.
And he's in the movie as their roadie in that little scene. Many people are in this movie. So we're going to try... Memento fucked it up immediately, but we're going to try and talk about these movies in their 3 acts. So I considered Act 1 to essentially be the beginning of the movie until they're properly on the tour, and Russell kind of takes him aside and is like, hey, make us look cool, basically. I don't know how long that equated to in your cut of the film, but for me that was about 40 minutes.
I'd say like 45 minutes to an hour would be like how much mine was. I think this was my favourite section of the movie.
Okay.
I think whilst I was watching it, I was kind of like, this is the bit that had the most performances that I really enjoyed. I think Zooey Deschanel is fantastic. I think Frances McDormand is fantastic.
Yep.
I think the young version of the kid is really good as well. And then I think Patrick Fugit is a bit less good. But I think like the fact that those first 3, like most of their early scenes are just Michael Angarano Zooey Deschanel, Francis McDormand, kind of like debating about his life, the revelation that he got skipped ahead 2 grades, the whole argument where like Zooey Deschanel goes like, you do hate her, you just don't know it yet, is really good stuff. And I love that Francis McDormand isn't like, she is trying to like guide his life. But she's also like kind of more learned than that kind of person is in traditionally in media. Like she is an arts and culture lecturer at university. Like she knows this stuff.
But she does ban Simon and Garfunkel of all people for being, you know, all their music being about sex and drugs and stuff. And I mean, I guess, but I don't know. Some of this stuff doesn't age well, you know. Like, and maybe that's the joke in the year 2000.
I mean, this movie definitely does make a lot of jokes about like, oh, isn't it weird that this thing happened like this in the 1970s.
Yeah, and like, oh yeah, Mick Jagger won't be touring at 50. Which
I feel like he's only there so Jimmy Fallon can do his Mick Jagger impression.
Which he doesn't do in My Cut, I'm afraid. I thought it was kind of shitty that the mother, like, I mean, maybe it's because Zooey Deschanel's character, is it Anita? Yeah. She leaves. And like, you know, she was so like, no rock music, don't do this, don't do that. So she leaves and moves to San Francisco. And she leaves behind the records, Cameron Crowe's real childhood record collection. And William, of course, like develops this love of music and grows up still loving it more and more and writing about it. And, you know, his mother now, like, she's not, like, she drives him to a Black Sabbath concert. She's always like, you know, oh, you know, you're going to be a lawyer and get home for graduation. But I feel she let him do all of this stuff that she didn't let Anita do. And maybe it is because of the regret of Anita leaving, but that struck me as a bit like, are you just full-on favourite childing William here?
No, I think it is very much to do with the fact that she didn't let Anita do this stuff and she realises that she needs to have a looser hand. Because you get that scene later on where her son comes back after being on the road for a good long while, missing his graduation. She's kind of there and everything is focused on their relationship. But the person that she gives the embrace to is that he comes back with his sister. Yeah. And I do think it is that kind of like tacit acknowledgement that like the reason that she was being less heavy-handed with William was
she literally pushed her away. She pushed her out of the house and she went on to become a fabulously 70s air stewardess.
But no, it's just, I think it's a really interesting, complicated family dynamic that, I mean, like, this is a very early performance for Zooey Deschanel. Her voice is like a lot deeper than it becomes. But it's also like, you get a feel that she is a star. Like, she isn't doing a whole lot in this movie, but you can see why she gets the kind of opportunities that she does after this movie.
When I remember first seeing it and thinking like, oh, is she just gone for the rest of the movie? And I, you know, sitting down to watch the credits in the rewatch for this, I was like, she's quite high up. Have they just done this because she went on to become more famous and like they've re-edited the opening credits? But she does come back. And she does have some really good scenes. And
yeah, but I also think that she is there for a good half an hour. She is. I think it's just because the bulk of this movie is focusing on the tour life. And the only real people who get fleshed out on the tour are Crudup, Hudson, and Jason Lee. It does mean that she does kind of like get up the credits just because she is quite integral to the first stretch of this movie.
Also integral is Philip Seymour Hoffman knocking it out of the park, as he is wont to do as Lester Bangs, which, an amazing name. Amazing that it's a real person who died of a drug overdose, as did Philip Seymour Hoffman, which is a tragic instance of art imitating life.
I mean, like this is one of the movies where they would pull scenes from to have as tribute to Philip Seymour Hoffman. Is a small part. It's three scenes, but like it's so memorable.
Of them over the phone, not with another person, so, you know, much easier to film. You know, he had 4 days available to them because he was a very busy person and he had the flu for all 4 of them. But,
and you can tell.
Yeah, but he's still so good. Like, Phil Sy Hoffman, so good. We miss you.
I mean, I actually have to check. Are we actually doing any more Hoffman movies? I don't think we are. I think this is our like one chance to talk about him.
Well, Cindercock New York was on a list at some point.
It was on a list at some point. No, but I mean, Philip Seymour Hoffman is one of the greatest actors.
Yeah.
If we do the 90s, I'm going to fight for Big Lebowski.
Oh no! I said Boogie Nights.
We could do Boogie Nights and Big Lebowski. We can have like even more. Yeah. But no, like he is a force. Like last year, I decided to listen to the top 1,000 albums of all time.
Your ongoing insane project. You kept
my ongoing insane project, which I'm still slowly working through. Like I've done the top 1,000, but that's not important right now. But like a lot of the stuff from the 70s, you would go to like the Wikipedia page or to people's criticism of it, and it's still being tinged by Lester Bangs Bangs, because he is such a force in rock criticism. Like, I disagreed with quite a few of his opinions. You kind of get this thing where, like, Cameron Crowe was the new generation of music critics that kind of, like, would cover the bands that people didn't like. Like, you see Lester Bangs throwing the Yes album on the floor in the radio scene, and Yes are widely seen as, like, one of the precursors of, like, or, like, one of the big prog bands of the 1970s.
Yeah, and I think Cameron Crowe might have written about Yes more than any other band somehow. I feel like there's a strong connection between Yes and Cameron Crowe. So yeah,
but yeah, it's obviously like Lester Bangs was someone like you. Yeah. But the thing is, it's an interesting line to cross, because I don't agree with Lester Bangs quite a bit on music criticism, and maybe that's because me coming up in the 2000s, like there's a lot of rockism to the way that he talks about stuff. But I do agree with him when he goes and says, like, what's the band he talks about? But he says the band that's so goofy and they're having fun, whereas the Doors are so self-serious.
The Who. He says the Who.
I don't think it's the Who. I think it's the Guess. This is the Guess Who.
Oh, sorry, the Guess Who.
Yeah, so it's the Guess Who that he says, like, they're having fun, and the Guess Who aren't the greatest band of all time. But
I think he says Jim Morrison is like something posing as a poet, so he's bad, whereas they are actually the thing that he's posing as, which makes them I don't know, some bullshit or other. But it's
but I mean, it's that thing where it's like music should be fun, and I do think there is I don't know if it is like those 1960s guys who came up with the Beatles and the Stones and all these people, that when they see when music's going in the 70s, which is much more in the Stillwater vein, and it is different to what was coming before it, but I don't think there was bad music in the 70s, and I don't think you can shrug off an entire genre in that way, which is kind of like my main argument with Lester Bangs. But the thing is,
Phillips Matt Hoffman's pretty good though.
Phillips Matt Hoffman is fantastic, and I think some of the lines that Lester Bangs has are superb, like the whole like love disguises sex, sex disguises love that he does later on in the movie is a fantastic line that is kind of scary in context of loser men being alone in the house and stuff like that, but like
in this bankrupt world the only true currency is when you're being uncool with someone or whatever.
It's an interesting line to cross, and I do think like it is that thing where like this kind of person can either figure out what they're doing and focus their energy into positive stuff like Cameron Crowe, like Lester Bangs has done, or they can go off the deep end. And I think
and just really love PewDiePie.
And just really love PewDiePie. But I think it is that kind of like fascinating thing, which is like there are all these people out there that fall in love with this stuff, and either you can embrace it and love it in a positive way, or you can't. And I think both William and Lester Bangs and Cameron Crowe, they do love this stuff.
Yeah.
In a positive way, which I think is such an important reason for why this performance and why these characters do work.
Jack Black and Jon Favreau auditioned for this. I could see it, but it's got to be Philip Seymour Hoffman. So Lester Bangs, pays him to go review a Black Sabbath concert. He can't talk his way backstage, but he does meet Penny Lane, played by Kate Hudson, and Stillwater, who are our fictitious band he will go on to cover. Kate Hudson is so fucking good in this movie. I couldn't think of a performance she gives in the rest of her career that's better than this. I think it gets better as it goes, but, she is just throughout it. She's a billion actresses auditioned for this, and we're gunning for it hard. She actually got cast as Zooey Deschanel's character, but then when Sarah Polley, who had been cast as Penny Lane, dropped out, she managed to worm her way in to be Penny Lane, and a career-defining performance for her.
I think she came so close to winning the Oscar for this.
It's her only nomination, I think.
It's her only nomination. I think she won the Golden Globe, and I think she was the favourite going into it, but lost it in the end. I mean, this is the case.
She's on the front cover. She's on all the marketing material.
It's an iconic imagery. I mean, the fact I think she's nominated for supporting, which feels weird because she's in this movie so much.
She's the lead actress.
She is the lead actress, but she's up as supporting, and I can see why you say that she's supporting.
Would you argue Frances McDormand or something is the lead?
I mean, but I think both of them were up for the supporting actress award that year. I think both of them got a nomination, which is probably why she lost, is because of vote splitting, because I think they're both fantastic performances. So it was Marsha Gray Harden for Pollock, which won, Judi Dench for Chocolat, and then Kate Hudson and Frances McDormand for Almost Famous, and Julie Waters for Billy Elliot were the Academy Award for supporting actress that year. It's a weird performance that kind of like scatters it, because it is the focal point of the entire movie, but she disappears for long swathes of it. Like she will kind of smile and then wander off to Russell's room, and
then we're not going to see her for a while.
And that's why it's such a.
But I think that's on purpose. I don't know, flitting in and out of this life, and William accusing her of not having anything substantive or whatever. It's a shame, because she is crushing it in pretty much every scene she has. But some part of me feels that was on purpose.
I think she is really good in this. I think is a very, like, this is her best performance. She doesn't really have another performance on this level until How to Lose a Guy in 10 Days.
Hey, just between you and me, like, no one else is listening, I kind of like How to Lose a Guy in 10 Days.
How to Lose a Guy in 10 Days is really good.
Okay, cool. On with the podcast.
I mean, like, she's good in that. McConaughey's fine. But, like, again, like, that's it. Those are the two movies that you think of when you think of Kate Hudson. Yeah. But we do have to talk about the fact that, so, in 2005, film critic Nathan Rabin comes up with the term Manic Pixie Dream Girl whilst watching Elizabethtown, which is Cameron Crowe's second follow-up to this. She is very much a Manic Pixie Dream Girl.
Sure.
Penny Lane is, like, if we're saying that Kirsten Dunst is in Elizabethtown, then Kate Hudson definitely is in this movie.
Sure, but she is also based on someone real, or many real people, apparently, but...
It's such an interesting... Because, like, obviously, like, the whole point of her is, like, men fall in love with her, and I don't know, like, she's an enigma, and there's not much to her character beyond that, but she's such a magnetic screen presence.
But she does go to Morocco, though.
She does go to Morocco. But no, it's one of those interesting things, because I, like, my big criticism with, like, the big swathe of this movie is when you have, like, Kate Hudson, Anna Paquin, Belt, B.G. Phillips, kind of, like, as the band-aids, is I do wish that there was a female creative voice, just to kind of, like, level this out, and I'm not sure who you'd get, because I do think that this 1970s culture of following bands around at this level is a very specific worldview. It's just one of those things where, like, because these characters are... It's a very particular archetype, and Cameron Crowe is one of the few people that you would imagine would be able to write this movie just because he did live this. But it is that just those characters are so thinly sketched, but they're also so magnetic in their screen presence. They're all kind of ethereal, and Anna Paquin is so young in this, but...
It's crazy that this was the same year as X-Men, and she just looks far younger here than she does.
Far younger, and I mean, I'll posit to you, like, is it because she's being sexualised so much more than she was in X-Men? Or maybe it's because they greyed her hair a little bit in X-Men. But no, it's interesting. I don't think it's bad, but I do think that there is kind of like an ethereal otherworldliness to the women in the tour section of the movie that is interesting.
I think this is very much a large problem that occurred in the 2000s in general.
But also, it must probably happened in the 1970s because...
Wow,
obviously you've got all these stories of, like, they actually did take, like, 14, 15-year-old girls with them, or, like, they didn't particularly care when they were, like, looking at the sea of fans, and they go, like, you're hot, come with me.
Well, I mean, like, when William confesses his age to her, and she keeps going, me too, it's just sort of like, how old actually are you, Penny?
Well, I mean, there's the theory that, like, when she says I'm 16, and then she goes, see, isn't the truth better to say? Is the idea that, like, she is saying, like, no, I feel better saying that I'm 16, but then he immediately goes, I'm 15. And whether or not that is her tricking him into saying his correct age, or whether or not that is her inadvertently revealing that she's only 6 years old at this point.
But then it makes it even more terrifying when she says things like, he's going to be my final project, and, like, you know, she's a legend, and she's been doing this for years. It's like, oh, no. So Stillwater. Noah Taylor as their tour manager, I think, is good. He's always good. A great little character actor. 2 of them are musicians/actors with a musical background. But
Mike Kozlek from Sun Kill Moon, bit of a dickhead, very much like forthright in his opinions.
I see. But, you know, the money pair, Jason Lee, Earl from My Name is Earl for a lot of people, but Jason Lee, you should know who Jason Lee is. As Jeff Beebe, vocalist, he is obviously not actually providing the vocals for Stillwater. But the most prominent member of the band, Billy Crudup as Russell Hammond. So Brad Pitt was cast, and it took him several weeks or months to admit he didn't really get it, which is funny. And, you know, what a coincidence that we followed Memento with this. 2 films where Brad Pitt was originally slated to be, or this isn't the lead male, but sort of the lead adult male in this film. Christian Bale and Billy Crudup were the finalists to replace Brad Pitt, and Billy Crudup got it. And I love that Billy Crudup was cast here because he was, like, sexy and mysterious and dark, and then he will go on to be cast in the wonderful piece of cinema that is Watchmen because he's, like, boring and dull and, like, very out of time.
His career after this is a total mess. What he did Big Fish, which he's alright in but a little bit grating. Mission Impossible 3, he's like 3rd lead in that, and I cannot remember him at all. Watchmen, obviously, and then after that, like, he's in Spotlight. I've heard he's good in Spotlight. I've still not seen Spotlight.
Yes, he is in Spotlight.
He's plays Flash's dad in Justice League. He was on that terrible Netflix show Gypsy with Naomi Watts. It's just like he hasn't had anything since to kind of like...
It's crazy to think that. Like, you think of him and you're like, he kind of hasn't really worked out. And then you look at this and it's like, look at this dude. Like, this is what an attractive human being. Like, how charismatic he is and everything. But
well, that's the thing is, like, both Billy Crudup and Kate Hudson, like, you think that if people watch this movie and they go like, oh, these guys are stars, and then no one really did anything with them. And all the people that kind of, like, became famous, Deschanel, Pat Gwynn, Rainn Wilson, Jay Baruchel, Eric Stone Street, like...
Everyone is in this goddamn movie. Yeah, Peter Frampton taught him to play guitar for realsies for this movie, and they practiced as a band for like 4 hours a day for 6 weeks, which is crazy because none of them are actually, well, maybe the drummer and the bass guitarist are actually playing, but, you know, if Pearl Jam are doing the guitar and there's, I forget his name, he's like a session musician guy, but he provided the vocals. It's like, so you just practice lip syncing together for 6 weeks just so that you could look like an authentic band. And in their defense, they do look the part in the, I understand why you don't have a ton of scenes of them performing because they're not a real band, but I kind of wish there was a bit more of it, and maybe there is on the cut you saw, but, you know, there's like 3 scenes, maybe 4.
Yeah, I think it's about that, I think.
And one of them, you know, Russell electrocutes himself, which happened to 2 different musicians, including Ace Frehley of Kiss. Yeah, so like they stop performing after like a minute because he electrocutes himself. I think it's a decent fake band.
It's more convincing than like Matt Damon in Eurotrip.
How goddamn dare you?
I don't mean that Matt Damon's bad. I think that scene is fantastic, but I do think it's a better
incredibly
fake.
Clear that it's not him. And
yes, exactly. Yeah. Whereas this is, I mean, it's not as good as Bradley Cooper was in Star is Born last year, but it's still like actually really quite good.
If not for the music, just the general presentation and the look and everything, it had to work if you're going to do this and like have him covering a fake band. Like, I think it's for the best that it is a fake band and it isn't like, right, we're going to cast a fake Allman Brothers or we're going to cast a fake Led Zeppelin.
Yeah, like we see some of these bands from a distance. Like you see David Bowie being covered up with a coat and stuff like that. Like you hear Black Sabbath songs in the background, but you don't actually get to see a lot of these bands from around the time.
Yeah, so he charms them, he gets invited backstage, you know, he gets Penny's number, and amazingly his mother agrees to let him go on the tour, and they have this little conversation about going to Morocco. Fun fact, when he says yes, and she says, are you sure? And he says, ask me again. That was a legit moment of Patrick Fugit wanting another stab at the line, and Cameron Crowe just thought it was a really charming moment and left it in there as like a, you know, cutesy little moment between the 2 characters. Kate Hudson's little monologue in French at some point here in this early stretch is pretty good. I like Jason Lee ripping Rolling Stone, but then saying it'd be pretty cool to be on the cover though.
Yeah, I mean that's the whole thing is like I enjoy the fact that they repeatedly call him the enemy. It's an old joke. I mean, I know that the famous magazine in the UK isn't called The Enemy, but
every time they said it, I thought that though.
but it is a thing. Like there's a comic book that I've read where like they reference the enemy or the adversary, and it is very much like a rip-off of that idea that enemy means the enemy. They are the foe, which I just find very interesting.
Yeah, and it becomes this term of endearment. I think it's very cool. And like, yeah, grab the enemy, tell the enemy, you know, the enemy's cool. Yeah. Apparently, one of the Allman Brothers constantly thought Cameron Crowe was a narc when he was covering them. So, you know, there you go.
And now we kind of move into this kind of like very stodgy,
this
middle part of the movie.
Yeah, it's kind of bloated, and in summary, just the band are getting bigger, and he is becoming better friends with them. But he is also frustrated by his inability to actually secure a proper interview with them because, well, you know, Russell will say like, oh, I've grown past them musically and I can't go further, and, you know, oh, I can't believe I'm telling you this, don't, you know, make us look cool. And he's there when they get their first t-shirt and it's Russell as front and center and the rest of the band are fuzzy, and it's like, oh, obviously you're not going to cover any of this. And it's this increasing thing of, and he's only supposed to be there until he gets what he needs, and he's promised his mother that, you know, oh, I'll come home after this, and he keeps having to go one more city, and he misses his graduation at the end, and you know, he has to stay all the way to New York.
Yeah, you get his like interviews with the bassist and the drummer, and they don't give him much of anything.
No.
His interview with Jason Lee is very much that kind of like fake posturing, and he wants to talk to Russell.
Yeah, Russell's is the one that everyone is interested in. He is the one that, you know, when they are spotted out in the neighborhood, it's like, oh, are you Russell from Stillwater? It's like, you know, he's the sexy one.
So one of the additional scenes in the extended cut is a radio interview that they do with Carl Gass as a DJ, where he's like strung up on heroin and falls asleep in the middle of the interview.
Perfect.
So Russell and Jeff kind of like take over the broadcast and just start swearing openly over the mic. And it's the first time in my view that you kind of get the feeling of like what the tensions are with the band. Because you get this whole like, we're going to dance around the fact that we don't like each other and not say our true feelings, because like they do that a lot where they'll like kind of like manly posture up to each other but not fully say what's actually going on in their minds. You kind of get two scenes of that before you get to the final confrontation that they have.
Well, I know there's a scene in the in the extended cut where like I think Jeff is wearing a t-shirt that says his own name but it's got a picture of Russell above it, and he says something to the effect of, I'm the you they get when they can't get you, which I think is a good line. You do see this tension, and the t-shirt thing is, you know, that's rough. Even something that's played for laughs, like when the tour bus drives off and Jeff is still like in the bathroom, is like, oh, I'm easy to forget, I'm only the lead fucking singer, like, you know.
Yeah, I mean, like there's lots of like really fun individual portions to this. I think like it's the fun stuff that keeps coming up when they get electrocuted and they run off and they have the fight with Mark Maron and stuff like that. And I can't remember which character it is, but the one who like runs after the tour bus and starts telling William that his mum called
Sapphire,
and then she runs into
the wall. Yeah. Oh, I love the phone call between her and the mother as well. Because it's like, you know, this is all of our worst nightmares. She's hearing about drugs and this and that, but she's also like, hey, he's such a nice boy. He likes women. He respects women. It was like, this is really nice. When Russell is trying to kind of be a dick and be funny and like talk to his mother over the phone, and then it turns into this really serious, like soul-searching, hey, you can still be a person of substance. And I thought they were going to do more with, when she says he's 15 years old, Russell kind of looks at William like, oh god. And I thought they were going to do more with that. I
think it's like the realization that like this is just a kid. This isn't someone who is an adult. This is a 15-year-old. Because I think they go in there thinking like, you're 17, 18 years old, but it's actually like, oh no, this guy is super young. But like again, it's like much like Phillips Seymour Hoffman, like Frances McDormand. Most of her scenes after he leaves are over the phone, and she's so good. Like you can tell like when she does the commanding voice down the phone, and it's like convincing these people to like focus and like listen to her. Like they do it, and it's so convincing and so good.
And Billy Crudup was actually on the other end of the phone when she was doing her half of that scene, and her like breaking down after that phone call, like just quietly in her house, just missing her son terribly. Like at the beginning you're almost like, oh, this overbearing mother, but it's like, you are being remarkably good about this. Like your kid is doing all of this shit and you are just like having to just accept it and settle for it, and like he keeps not calling and he keeps missing his tests, and
it's that interesting thing where like she obviously blames herself because she pushed him ahead. He probably wouldn't do this if he wasn't.
It goes from like, you know, no rock music and like this isn't a career for you to like, you know, she's pushing him to be a good writer and stuff, and it's great. And like I like the bond between Frances McDormand and Billy Crudup. Like it's you know, they only have like the phone scene and the one at the end, but it's good stuff. And I remember thinking like Russell's gonna suddenly have this big epiphany because Frances McDormand got through to him, but it's kind of, it doesn't quite happen until the very end.
But we do get, after the scene with the t-shirt and they have the big blowout about like which members of the band, we probably get the two most iconic scenes from the movie that don't involve Philip Seymour Hoffman.
Him jumping in the pool.
And
Tiny Dancer.
And Tiny Dancer.
Apparently Patrick Fugit is such a bad singer they had to edit him out of that because he was terrible. And also Cameron Crowe made them do it over and over and over and over again, and Noah Taylor at some point was like, I'm not doing it anymore. So that's good. But it is beautiful just seeing them. You know, it's starting with a smattering and then, you know, all these like open, sulky hostilities, and it all just melts away because of the love of the music,
they also
man.
do so much of the song that they hold off on getting to the chorus. Like, it's not like they go at the point and they go like, you do half a verse and then we'll get to the chorus. Like, they do get a good chunk of the song in there, which does help with the build-up.
You also see that ugly side of Russell where, like, you know, he's having a good time at first and it's all like, this is fun, he's at a local party and, you know, this, that and the other. But when it's like the next morning and he's still high and drunk and everything, and he like shouts at William and like, I think he puts his hands on him, doesn't he? And he's like, the band's over and all this. It's like, oh geez, this is all quite dark. But yeah, I agree. I think this stretch of the film is probably the least interesting of the three. Like,
I think it's a chunk of the film where it's best in like little moments and bursts.
Yeah,
it's a Shaggy Dog situation with moments of brilliance. The I'm a Golden God on the rooftop is fantastic. Like him being high and like like flicking the lights off and like picking up things and saying what's real, but then he picks up like a little model or something, but calling it real is like wonderful little moment. It's those moments that really, really work, but it is very much like when you think on it, it's like everything kind of smushes together.
It's also the portion of the film where 15-year-old William loses his virginity to 3 women at once, and it's like, maybe that's true, but knowing that this is all about your life and that you chose to put this in does make you look a little bit like a wanker Cameron Crowe, but never mind.
I know. It's like, you could have just said, like, is Anna Paquin, but instead there's all 3. One does vanish by the morning.
It is what it is. It's a little bit disturbing, but, you know.
We do finish that scene with the phone call the next morning, where, is it Estrella that picks up the phone, or is it Sapphire?
I don't know. One of the 3, yeah.
It's definitely not Anna Paquin, because she's the one that he, like, puts his hand over her mouth to stop her from talking. But, like, he tells them the pitch that Lester Bangs told him to say of, like, you're writing a story about a mid-level band struggling with fame and stuff like that.
Yeah, and he told him, you're not their friends, and they're going to seduce you with this and that, and that is the problem he has in the middle of this film. He is loving being their friend and living this lifestyle, but he gets very frustrated, like, the morning after this. And, what am I to you? And, like, you know, go do our laundry or whatever.
I love that Rolling Stone turned to him and say, he hasn't said them anything, and they just turned to him and say, we're going to give you 1,000 more words, and also you're in contention for the cover. And you're like, what is going on? He has sent you nothing.
Yeah, and it's his improvised pitch as well. Like, he's making this shit up while trying to stop a woman from saying anything weird. I also love later on when they're like, yeah, we're going to use a Mojo. It's cutting edge technology. It sends a page in 18 minutes. It's like, oh, goodness me. This sort of stretch of the movie, I feel, it's up until they are seduced by big-time manager Dennis Hope, played by Jimmy Fallon, who coaxes them off the bus and onto a plane. The bus is the Almost Famous tour. That's where this secondary title comes from after Untitled was turned down. Yeah, it's Jimmy Fallon. It's SNL era Jimmy Fallon doing Jimmy Fallon stuff.
He feels more like my interpretation of what Jimmy Fallon is actually like, because he's a bit of a dick.
He is a bit of a dick, undeniably.
But this is also where the second big, like, addition to the movie comes, which is like, so in the original version of the movie where he does the whole, like, I'm going to go outside and I'm going to decide whether or not I'm going to go with you, and then they say, I miss him already. It smash cuts to them walking up to the plane. In the extended version of the movie, there's like a 3-minute sequence of Kate Hudson dancing around with flowers, which is weird, because, like, listening to someone describe what that scene transition is, I'm like, no, that would have been a lot better. Like, why?
Yeah. So speaking of Kate Hudson, this sort of closing act of the movie, it starts with this very dark and allegedly true thing of William witnesses the girls getting traded to other bands in a poker game, and Russell is putting pressure on this to happen because his girlfriend is going to be at the New York show and he can't be banging Penny while his girlfriend is there. So William is very visibly upset by this, as anyone with any shred of empathy would be, and when he is next talking to her, he lets it slip as their argument gets a bit heated. And we talked about how good she is in general, but this is, for me, her best moment. It's when she learns this, that, you know, he sold you for beer, and she's immediately crying. Then she cracks the joke about what kind of beer, and then you see the smile fading, and it's just like, oh my god, this is...
My counterpoint to this is...
Sure.
I think this is one of Patrick Fugit's worst moments.
Sure, but, I mean, I'm not...
I don't like
attention to him.
But sure, I think she's fantastic, and I don't think he can nail the dramatic bits. I think he's so much better in almost his reactions rather than being proactive. All the stuff that I enjoy him in is when he's useless, whereas when he's driving this forward at this point, I think he's so much less interesting as a character, and I think it is a detriment. And maybe it is kind of the point where, like, he is still a 15-year-old teenager and he's doing this kind of, like, petulant thing to someone who he loves, and it hurts her, and I don't think that's his intention, but I do think that it's that kind of split of saying, like, I'm not sure whether or not his immaturity goes far enough in making it work. But I mean, I do think, like, Kate Hudson is fantastic. The single tear that she kind of, like, sheds at this point. But it doesn't leave me questioning. So they're Band-Aids. They follow around a band that they love. Yeah. And obviously, like, being traded for, what is it, like $1,000 and...
No, less than that. It's like 50 or something.
50 and some beer. Like, it's awful. But there is a lot of the girls kind of after this scene saying, I'm now with this band, I'm now with this band. I'm just intrigued, like, what the actual culture of this was. Because obviously, like, Anna Paquin goes, I'm going with Deep Purple to England. But it's not like she's saying, like, oh, my two favourite bands before this are Stillwater and Deep Purple. It almost feels like so many of these people they do like these bands and they do like these people, but it is more
my favourite is whoever I'm with right now.
Yeah, my favourite is whoever it is right now, and I just enjoy the atmosphere of being in this thing, which I think is really interesting. But it is also, is it about the music then, or is it about the culture around the music? Because there aren't many scenes of them doing concerts. It doesn't feel like it's about enjoying the music. It feels like it's about enjoying the people, which
the hotels and the bus and the parties and everything.
Yeah, like even the girls are doing that. It's not like they go like, come on, we need to go watch the show. And I don't know if that's because it was expensive. I don't know if that's because they hadn't trained enough. But it is that disconnect of, we are trying to say that the music is the important thing, and there's music playing constantly, and you can tell that William loves the music, but the movie doesn't make the people feel like they love the music.
You spoke earlier about how it would have been good to have a female voice in creative. The point where I would really agree with that is when, so she goes to New York anyway, and then she runs off upset when she sees, Russell with his girlfriend and gets asked to leave. She ODs on Quaaludes, and William slut shames her and kisses her while she is quite clearly not in any way with it before calling doctors, and it's like, that's not great stuff, is it?
It's bad. Not that the movie doesn't not judge him, but I think the movie does enough of a job to say, like, this is creepy, like, this is bad, because immediately after that you get the scene where the doctor comes into the room, or whoever works at the hotel, and they're trying to shove the pipe down her mouth.
The stomach pump is so dramatic to watch, and like that's
it's
just a fake version. Like in real life,
it cuts to William watching, and then upbeat music starts playing, and he's got a smile on his face whilst he's watching her legs. And I think that goes some way to kind of like saying, like, this isn't right. He is kind of like objectifying this person who's going through this terrible time.
Yeah.
But then it's immediately undercut by the fact that the next scene is them working arm in arm through Central Park whilst she, like, actually tells him her true name and stuff like this.
Lady Goodman. Get out of here with that bullshit.
She's just like, I think my mum wants me to be in the aristocracy. It's like, what, if you marry a lord, will you be Lady Goodman?
Maybe. So he puts her on a plane, sends her home. And speaking of planes, kind of the big climax of the movie, while the band are flying, it's meant to be the end of the tour, like they're flying back.
They're flying. I think they're flying to the photo shoot for the Rolling Stone cover.
Oh, yeah, with Leibovitz.
Yeah.
And there's horrific turbulence, and they all start to confess things to each other, such as the drummer, is it the drummer, I think? His first line in the movie is, I'm gay, and Jeff says he slept with Russell's girlfriend, and he's in love with her, and, they talk about Penny, and everything comes out, and William says he loves her, and I think it's good.
I think it's good too. I'm glad that no one mentions the gay thing, because I feel like in the 2000s it would have been an easy thing to make a joke about, and then you get into kind of like gay panic, and that would have been bad. I'm glad they just leave it at I'm gay and kind of don't take it any further than that.
Apparently Cameron Crowe, I don't know which musician it was, someone during some bad turbulence said, I'm sleeping with your wife, and Cameron Crowe like witnessed it, and like that's where this all came from. But you get the big, everyone's putting everything out there, like actually just saying it and all that. Apparently when they show this movie on planes, they edit this entire scene out, which I wonder how, I mean, I guess you're not that bothered about the narrative while you're on a plane, but I don't know how it quite works without that scene, but hey ho.
Because you get the scene where, like, I've read this article about this plane scene, you're like, what plane scene?
Yeah, I think it's good. It's not amazing, but yeah, it's good. But
no, I feel like it feels like the kind of thing that in another movie would be like the centerpiece of the movie. But
I feel if you cared more about Jeff in particular and the rest of the band, it would have worked a lot better. But it's just like, this is the Russell show, and maybe that is a meta commentary on how the band is.
I mean, is the Jimmy Fallon saying that he like did a hit and run in your cut of the movie?
Yes.
Yes, okay.
Equally not funny, I would imagine.
It's not funny, but again, it's how I interpret it. Like, I would not be surprised if Jimmy Fallon started a show and it was just like, I did a hit and run and didn't find the person.
SNL Fallon is the true Fallon. Don't be seduced by his carefully scripted off-the-cuff remarks on his thing. But the real good stuff, I think, is when they land and the band parts ways and Russell tells William, write whatever you want. And, he calls Lester and he gets that encouragement to be brutally brutally honest, and he is. And when the fact checkers from Rolling Stone call them to ask, they all freak out, and Russell finds it funny, but then ultimately he is the one that denies it all and kills the story for him and like ruins William's life. And it's like, you know, what a window into Russell, you know, like, and I kind of, you know, I think the 2-hour version might almost be too long, and your version is even longer, but I also still wish I knew more about the people that this is about, and like exploring why he killed the story, even though he's been the one throughout who's been most on William's side and everything. It's like, I don't know. I think that's an interesting moment, and they end up reversing it very quickly, but
I do like that you have that hot minute though where like he reveals to the Rolling Stone officers that he's 15 years old. Everyone's kind of freaked out that they've hired a kid to do this, except for the editor, who kind of goes like, come on, let's do this. And then they read his story and they're just like, this is crap, this is
because he tries,
this is a puff piece,
and then he writes the brutally honest version. I think that's good. And you know, him running into his sister again, and she's like, yeah, you're independent, you've nailed it, and he's just like, look at this guy, he's miserable, and asking,
he's had his story cut. The people who he thought he liked have spiked his career aspirations. He doesn't know where Penny Lane is. He's missed his graduation. Everything's been for naught, and he's had fun, but he's also had like probably quite an emotionally trying time.
And I like that she asks, you know, she's like, oh, we can go anywhere, and it's like, we're going home and you're going to hug our mother. And I think that's a wonderfully played scene by Francis and by Zooey Deschanel, him just, you know, moping into the bed and everything. It's kind of crazy that, you know, Sapphire, who has been played as a comic relief character throughout, is the one that finally gets through to Russell. You know, like, you know, when Russell's like, oh, are Penny and William okay? And she's the one that is like putting him on blast, and it actually gets through to it. I don't know, it's just kind of weird. And it's again like, maybe if we knew anything about Sapphire, this might have played better, or if they had any scenes together really before this.
Very, very much like they are still these kind of like ethereal, they're almost like spirits or whatever. Like they've come to deliver the moral story at points.
Yes, they flit in and say the wisdom and then flit off again.
Yeah, I mean, like every single one of them, like Anna Paquin, like she talks in nonsense occasionally and then will like kiss him on the cheek and run away. Like,
I am super proud of Penny for, you know, Russell calls her and is like, I want to see you, and, you know, fooling himself into thinking that this teenage girl is like a future for him. And she instead sends him to William's house, and, you know, again, the scene with Billy Crudup and Frances McDormand is great. I love Zooey Deschanel like lusting for him openly. I
love that he takes ages to figure out where.
I know, he's so dumb. Russell is a very dumb person.
Where is she? It's like, what? She's there. That's where Anita is.
You know, he goes into one of his bedroom and he gives him the interview, and he says, oh, I called them and okayed it, and, you know, they go on tour again on a bus, and Penny goes to Morocco, and it's all lovely and happy and wonderful.
And the Rolling Stone cover comes out,
and I think they name
the bus like not on an airplane tour.
I think it is a nice, charming ending. You know, him finally getting that interview in his own bedroom, like with the posters everywhere and everything, after he was chasing it for the whole movie. Yeah, I think we agree that the beginning and the end are more interesting than the middle, but then like the highlight reel of the movie, a lot of the scenes come from the middle. It's a bit bloated.
But I don't think it hurts it.
No, it doesn't.
I mean, I watched a 3-hour version of this movie, and
it's breezy.
It's the kind of thing that you can put on and just kind of like get whisked away with. I haven't regretted spending 3 hours watching it today. I watched it in kind of like half-hour, 40-minute chunks at points.
And it does feel very, like, because there's so minimal plot, and it's just kind of like, and now they're in this city, and now they're in this city, so you could easily watch this in distinct little chunks. For me, it's the authenticity, like, it feels authentic, and they feel like a real band, and obviously Cameron Crowe knows his shit, and he's gone to great lengths to make this feel real, and the fantastic performances from, you know, Frances McDormand and Kate Hudson and Philip Seymour Hoffman, and to a lesser extent Billy Crudup, but I think he's decent enough. I think all of that helps paper over the cracks of the fact that, you know, there isn't really a plot, and it does feel a bit aimless at times. I feel it is being raised up by those things in a way.
Yeah, I think it's interesting that Cameron Crowe doesn't return to this well until Roadies, which was his show for Showtime a couple of years ago, which is also not very good.
Have you seen Pearl Jam 20?
I've not.
It's another one that is just sitting on my shelf and I keep meaning to watch. I hear that is good, but
it's one of those interesting things because, like, I look at the list of people in Roadies, and so on Roadies, it's a lot of modern rock bands, and I kind of, as I said earlier, like I do get the vague feeling that like he's quite rockist.
Yes.
Which I think is like one of my big issues with kind of like the point of view spread across the movie, is that like this isn't a guy who 20 years later will be saying like, oh yeah, hip hop is like the new punk, that kind of thing, and that's obviously like a entirely different question, because I think at this point where this movie is set in the 1970s, this is a very mainstream and okay view because he is supporting the new artists. But you do kind of get the feeling that this movie is kind of saying like, oh, wasn't rock and roll great?
Yeah, but those were his new artists, and once new artists come around, it doesn't feel like he's going to go with them.
70s were where it's at. The 70s were like the peak best times.
Yeah,
and I
no one can fuck with Led Zeppelin or the Allman Brothers. Like,
yeah, like you get Jay Baruchel being a literal Led Zeppelin like junkie, like literally following around the country.
We talk about how young was Anna Paquin. How young was Jay Baruchel in this?
Probably about 17, 18.
That's insane. He looks like 12.
He's 2-3 years off doing Undeclared at this point. Yeah. He obviously grows up a lot in those 2 years because he does look like a college person in Undeclared.
Yeah. You got Rainn Wilson in it for 60 seconds max, and Mitch Hedberg, the late great Mitch Hedberg, is in this movie, and all sorts of people. But yeah, I think it is a movie to remember for who's in it, how good they are in it, and being a very authentic version of what it is going for. And I think a lot of people could attempt this and probably wouldn't be able to capture that to the same degree. Again, we're not ranking these from 1 to 25, but this is definitely, it's not on this list with a bullet. But I do deeply appreciate it. I think it is doing some really good stuff. There are some things to complain about here, probably more so than some of our other ones. But
yeah, if you're doing a list of the 100 best movies of the decade, this is on there with a bullet. I think the main reason why we're doing this is because of our general lack of doing Pixar and our general lack of knowledge of foreign cinema.
Yeah,
probably the two big reasons why we're covering this instead of doing something else. How do you feel about this? This movie won the best screenplay original at the Oscars. Because that's the thing, is it doesn't feel like a screenplay movie. This feels like the kind of thing that was done on set as ad-lib and...
Yeah, exactly. I was about to say, you could tell me that the cast improvised most of the dialogue and I'd believe you. Yeah, it doesn't feel written, it feels performed, and it feels like Cameron Crowe had the vision of the production and the set design and all of that shit, but there's not really much of a story to it. You could sum it up very easily, and yeah, I wouldn't have given it screenplay at all.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, when we're looking back on this discussion, I think we spent a good 30 minutes talking about the performances and the actors, and then we just and then the plot kind of happens. And
yeah, but I mean, you've got at least one person giving the performance of their career, and you've got someone else who's giving one of the best performances of his career in a very short amount of time.
I mean, you have two actors who are never bad in Frances McDormand and Phillips Matt Waters, just doing maybe not career best work, but work that would definitely sit on a highlight reel, and has sat on a highlight reel in the case of Phillips Matt Waters, and this is Kate Hudson's defining performance. The Blu-ray case is still just a picture of
her face.
Kate Hudson. Yeah.
Well, there you go. I mean, I don't feel we have to sit here and defend these choices that much, but in conclusion, this has been Almost Famous. Next week, we will be moving into the year 2001, and Denzel Washington's second Oscar, or was it first?
It's Training Day. Is it your favourite movie?
Is it my favourite movie?
Yeah.
No.
No?
I like it a great deal, and I kept
like it a great deal.
pestering you to watch it, and you wouldn't, and it took this podcast to do it. But you have until next week to watch that. Training Day next week. And this has been There Will Be Movies, because, Ben, will there be movies?
Of course there'll be movies.
There will be movies. EnterTheRealWorld.com, SoundCloud.com/Mike and Matt. Thank you, everyone. We will see you next week for Training Day.
And I did it for so long, I got nothing to show. All these times